This conference will now be recorded.
It's not a department. It doesn't matter, you guys work for us. What you agreed to doesn't matter. The law says you don't have to wear a mask. I'm not wearing a mask. Request tonight.
We've been asking, due to our decision to wear masks to protect the health and safety of some of our family members, we've asked everyone, since we've been back in person, to kindly wear masks while they're joining us. And it's a very brief time that, well, the meeting's available. The meeting's available.
Right over there.
The meeting's available online to folks who did not want to do that.
You're way over
6 feet away.
We have asked people, and everyone else who's been attending our meetings has been considerate enough to wear them. We've asked that people wear them.
I don't wear them. I never wore them.
Good. The meeting is available online to folks who don't want to be here. We can set you up with a computer outside the room to join the meeting and make comments. We are allowed to require this. We are allowed to request it. Yeah, we are. As long as we make the meeting available online, folks have access to a public meeting online. That is something that we are allowed to offer folks.
I didn't hear anything about it. I was just in the grocery store though, and there was 15 times more people in there. Not a single mask.
It's not required everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Some entities are asking folks to continue to wear them. We have done that so that we can safely meet in person. And we're just asking folks to be courteous and respect that. That's all. Okay, well, the meeting's available online, so we're going to ask you to go ahead and access it online. Thank you, everyone, for wearing your masks. We appreciate your consideration. I will call the Tuesday, September 6th meeting of the Monmouth City Council to order. And we will ask our city recorder, Phyllis Bowman, for the roll call, please.
Councillor Beltz,
Here.
Councillor Carey and Councillor Lopez are excused. Councillor McKeel,
Here.
Councillor Oberst,
Here.
Councillor Salinas Oliveros,
Here.
Mayor Coons.
I am present. This evening, I will like to welcome folks and note that we do not have a live stream this evening, but people are welcome to call into the GoToMeeting to take public comment. Comments from the community are entertained during the time designated under citizens' comments. If you wish to speak to the council, please fill out a comment card and turn it into the city recorder or to Suzanne Duffner in the corner at the beginning of the meeting. If you are online, please open the chat bubble and type to Phyllis Bowman your name and the topic you wish to speak to. Speakers' comments in this forum are limited to 3 minutes, but the council welcomes additional information in writing. Typically, a speaker's comment is taken under advisement to allow time for the council to review an issue. However, the mayor or councilors may ask a speaker for additional information or may convey to the speaker some information that addresses their comment. Please note on the comment card if you would like to receive follow-up communication, and if so, what avenue is preferred. Thank you for your attendance at this meeting of the Monmouth City Council. And at the moment, I only have one speaker listed. So if we have any additional speakers, I might ask folks, if you're all here for the same reason, to designate a spokesperson who can give a comment card to Suzanne, and we will do the flag salute to get started this evening. So, Councillor Oberst, can you lead us in that?
We pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We start our meeting with the consent calendar tonight that consists of the minutes of the council meeting of August 16th. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
I second.
Thank you, Councillor McKeel for the motion and Councillor Salinas Oliveros for the second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thank you very much. This does take us to public comments, and so I will ask Bill Foster to come forward.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Foster.
I just came to thank you for your support of the Music in the Park series that we just finished. That was a fabulous year. We enjoyed it. Some of the council came and allowed people to come and visit with them, hoping that was productive. We also had Suzanne was doing the downtown plan at times, so it was very good. The music itself was excellent. The thing I noticed this year was that we had plenty of participation from our business partners, but we were also drawing people from all over the valley. I mean, it wasn't just you have the typical groupies that follow bands, but these were people that were coming back from Albany, McMinnville, Sweet Home. They were coming back because they enjoyed the fact that they enjoyed the variety of music they had, that they were not cover bands, that they were people that coming in. They enjoyed the fact of the cleanliness of the park and the peacefulness of the crowd. And so they really enjoyed that. And I think that's a tribute to our community itself. And they were really, really impressed and amazed, and the bands especially, was of our amphitheater. That a community this size could do something as that grand. And they really, really, really appreciate it. But other than that, I mean, it's just a great. Richard Mann and myself, we've done this since 2010. We added this year, Kelly Carmichael came and joined us to begin to work into the system. So we work real good with the bands. We enjoy working with the bands. And so we've done that. Other than that, I think we're a good draw. We are showing the city well, and really people like that. So I mean, we're making draw. People are finding out about Monmouth and how we are here. So I just think that's all I wanted to do was to thank you for all your support, because it's greatly appreciated. We don't always acknowledge that support as much as we should. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
For all your work.
Yeah, thank you for all your hard work and the great partnerships that we have, the Ash Creek Arts Center with the Art for Kids, and the booths that we have from our partners at the city, at the Chamber and Western Oregon. So thanks for all your personal work on that, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, I don't have any other comment cards here in person. Phyllis, do we have anything that was sent in, or that is anyone online who's indicated?
There is no one online, Mayor Kuntz, but I did receive an email this afternoon with the following public comment from Heather Chase. In current standing, Monmouth City Code dictates that it is unlawful to produce any amplified music at any time in Monmouth. This ordinance is outdated, and not addressing it until now has given a handful of residents the opportunity to villainize and harass a local and well-loved business on Main Street. Having live music at 7 in the afternoon is not excessive. Even richer is the fact that this business is literally next door to the city amphitheater, where live music is played at the same volume level during much of the same hours weekly during the summer. How many noise complaints has the city received on that? Are we sure that this isn't a targeted attack against a local small business? It is ridiculous that one or two individuals that continually complain overrule the hundreds of people supporting local musicians and business. The business in question already halts live music at 10 p.m. in line with surrounding city ordinances and the City of Monmouth's own construction noise ordinance. The business owners are not unreasonable or non-compliant. A clear and effective noise ordinance that outlines a specific time frame that amplified music is allowed is overdue and will balance the success and support of local businesses with a quality of life for residents in downtown Monmouth.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
All right, that takes us to our business agenda tonight. We do have one item that requires our approval, and I believe that Marty Wine, our city manager, has the information on this.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, if you recognize our agreement with Polk County, an intergovernmental agreement with Polk County to run the resource center, and feel like you just saw this a few weeks ago, you would be correct. So the reason you have an item before you tonight is that we've been asked by the City of Independence to separate the joint Polk County, City of Independence, City of Monmouth intergovernmental agreement for resource center services, and that has in large part, the reason for that is about the way that Independence is electing to use their ARPA funding to pay for the service. So what you have before you tonight is a Monmouth and Polk County only agreement that covers the same services and the same terms for Monmouth's commitment of American Rescue Plan funding for Polk County Resource Services. I'm just asking you to ratify a slightly revised agreement from the one that you saw a couple weeks ago.
Thank you.
Any
Questions?
questions you have?
I was just gonna.
Go ahead.
I move to authorize the city manager to sign the intergovernmental agreement with Polk County and Independence for resource center services.
Independence out of the motion, correct?
Correct.
Sorry.
Oh,
that was
sorry.
an old motion.
I will reread that, my
Thank you.
error. I move to authorize the city manager to sign the intergovernmental agreement with Polk County for resource center services. I can read better now.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you, Councilor McKeel for the motion and Councilor Salinas Oliveros for the second. Were there any questions?
Just to comment that this is one of those things that we didn't realize that we were missing until it came, and we realized we were missing it. And the community has really embraced this as a focal point for services needed and saving a drive to Dallas for people who don't have a car. So,
yeah,
well done, and I'm glad to see it, continuing to work through this with the county.
Continuing and expanding. They are now open until 6 p.m. one night a week.
Wow.
And they have asked their host at the school district to use some additional space in the area they were in, just to be able to have additional resources, but also some privacy for families that come in. So glad to work with them and glad we can continue this and use our ARPA funding for this great service.
Nicely done, Ms. Wine.
Yes.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion to sign this amended agreement, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And seeing none opposed, go forth and sign. Thank you. Tonight we begin our work session with looks like we've got some visitors online. Suzanne Duffner, our Community and Economic Development Director, is here to catch us up on the latest and greatest version of our code amendment process. So we'll turn it over to Suzanne, Sarah, and Ryan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. As Mayor mentioned, we have a work session scheduled tonight for our second code amendment package. This is for the code update project that we've been working on for the last year plus, I think now. So this is the exciting phase where we're getting into the nitty gritty wording of what those changes will look like. And if you'll recall, we bundled these changes kind of into 3 topical areas, just so to hopefully not overwhelm you so much with them all at once. So this particular set, the second set of proposed changes, relates to more of the issues of the multimodal, so pedestrian friendliness and smart growth development principles, along with amendments to our commercial zones, our Main Street district, trying to streamline some of those zones that we have now. So the Planning Commission, just by way of background information, did have a work session on this on August 4th. So they are drilling down into the details and having very good conversations. And so know that you are well represented with them using their legal eye on those proposed changes and asking a lot of good, thoughtful questions. So this is an opportunity for the council to provide your feedback and learn a little bit more about what this set of changes is. And then we'll come back to you for another work session to deal with just the last set of code changes. That'll be more of the housekeeping and streamlining. So this is a pretty meaty packet, just if you're wondering why it was so thick, but important stuff. And we do have Sarah Breakstone with us online, who's going to kind of highlight some of those Planning Commission policy discussion items. And then hopefully you've had a chance to review it and get into some of your questions, specific questions about it and comments as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Breakstone. I'm a senior planner with OTAC. I think I've met most of you before. So as Suzanne mentioned, this is the second code package of 3. Quite a few amendments in this particular package. When we met with the Planning Commission last month, I had identified a handful of sort of discussion items, areas where I needed guidance to finalize the amendments. And I think what I'll do this evening is share those. I think there's 7 of them. I'll try to move through them really quickly. I'll identify what the discussion item was, and then I'll let you know what the Planning Commission said when we met. And then hopefully that will leave time at the end to hear any specific comments or questions from this group. I think we've got roughly 40 minutes, so probably not enough time to look at everything because there is so much, but hopefully we can hit the highlights. So with that, I am going to share. Maybe, let's see. Share screen. I take it you guys are not seeing that.
No.
You have sharing rights?
Yeah, I think Phyllis, yeah, Phyllis gave me, let's try this again. There we go. Did that do it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So let me just move things around so I can see what I am doing. That wasn't what I wanted to do. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to jump right in. The first discussion item was on page 53, and that's page 53 of the document. It's probably not page 53 of your packet, just so we're clear. One of the things that we did as part of this packet was combine your commercial zones into one chapter, and we put all of the permitted use lists into a table, and we tried to roll them up into use categories because each of the commercial zones, there are 5 of them, had a really long list of detailed uses attached to it. And in the interest of streamlining, we decided to move into more of a use category approach. So the language that we're looking at here is about those use categories. We had a category for schools and colleges, and there was some discussion about trade and vocational schools specifically. and that there is a threshold beyond which they should probably be a conditional use instead of something that is permitted outright because of their potential impacts. So that's the discussion we had. The initial threshold that was identified was 75,000 square feet, so that anything over 75,000 square feet would be a conditional use, and under that would be permitted outright. Feedback from the Planning Commission was, let's reduce that threshold to 30,000 square feet, which for context is the size of a roughly small to mid-sized grocery store. The other thought that they had was to keep them in the same category, and that's not necessarily worth explaining. They were split up into two different categories: schools and colleges and commercial uses, depending on the size. We decided that was too complicated. I think the important piece here is that threshold being reduced to 30,000 square feet, and to keep them conditional use in those zones where they are over 30,000 square feet. There was also some discussion about just making them conditional across the board, regardless of size. So that was where we left the discussion. Any thoughts or comments on that piece before I move on to the next one?
So I have one potential question here. A lot of K-12 public school districts are adding career and technical education facilities as part of their training. How would we characterize that? As part of the public school or as a vocational technical trade school?
That is a good question. We did not talk about that. My thinking is that it would my initial thought is that it would fall under the category of public school, that it is. So if it's part of a high school, it would just be considered part of the high school use. If it's an elementary school, it'd be part of the elementary school use. However,
yeah, it would probably be the portion at the high school level providing state mandated basic education. This would all be part of that. So if that's the clause that applies. And not that there's plans for a completely separate facility at this point, just saying, but it is something a lot of districts are getting into and providing. Councilor Ober.
I'm going to suggest that perhaps the rub on that is this a facility at an already existing school, like at the high school? If the districts were to decide to spin off and create a completely separate facility that is a vocational school, that might fall under the definition of vocational school. I would perhaps argue that. And so, I think there is a big hole in this that may need to spell out whether a school district provided vocational school is a public school or is it a standalone vocational school?
It would only be open to high school students that are enrolled at the high school, which is different than a separate voc tech. Anyway, not just don't want to bog that down. That just is an interesting thing based on some other things in other communities right
now. That's probably going to require a little bit of thinking. I think we can address that with a little bit of additional language, but you're right, that's probably a scenario that needs to be clarified. So we can do that. Other thoughts before I move on to the next one? All right. We are now down on page 56. Again, 56 in the document. This is the permitted use table, the new permitted use table for the commercial zones. The question here, or I guess the situation here, is when we combined the zones into a table and kind of rolled uses up into use categories, the distinction between your commercial office zone, which is CO, and your commercial retail zone, CR, became pretty, they're very similar. There are 2, maybe 3 places where the uses are different. They are highlighted in yellow. So recreational marijuana facilities are permitted differently. Let me see, I'm trying to remember offhand what else. Transmitter stations, towers, etc. And I think there was one more. I think it was a residential one. Yeah, short-term rentals. So there's three areas where those zones differ. So we had a discussion with the Planning Commission. Does it make sense to just combine those zones? The feedback that we got from them at that time was, let's not do that as part of this project. It also, you know, discussions with staff and the project team, doing a rezone and a mapping exercise is a little bit outside of the scope of this project. So for all of those reasons, the team sort of decided not to move forward with that idea and leave your zones the way they are, which is these 4 commercial zones plus your Main Street District zone. And I think that that's a fine approach. Any thoughts or questions about that?
Seeing none.
Seeing none, let's move on. There was some discussion about allowing manufacturing uses in the commercial zones when they are in conjunction with a permitted commercial use. And the intent behind this is that a common example is having a brewery that is attached to a brew pub. So they are able to manufacture beer on site and then sell it in the brew pub. So it's that kind of thing that we are trying to facilitate, a small manufacturing use that is linked to the commercial entity. So that is now permitted in the commercial zones, and the parameter that we put on it is that the manufacturing use has to produce a product that is used or sold as part of the commercial use. And that the manufacturing use is entirely contained within an enclosed building. And so the question to the Planning Commission was, are there additional restrictions that we should add here? Size limitations, orientation standards, things like that. And after some discussion, the thinking from the Planning Commission was that it's probably okay the way it is, and we can leave some flexibility. We can leave some flexibility and don't need to get more prescriptive with this particular use. Any comments on that? I know I'm moving through these quickly. I'm trying to save time.
I can imagine a situation where we would have wished that we had a size restraint on this, but imagining it and having it actually occur are probably very different things. I would hate to think about an extremely large manufacturing operation dropped into our commercial zone, but I do think that the chances of that happening are not very high. And I share planning's concern over should we have size limits. I just don't know the answer.
I do wonder if there are other standards in your commercial zones that would serve as restrictions on the size of a use like this, just sort of as a de facto restriction. You know, things like setback and entry orientations and, you know, things along those lines, lot coverage, that might kind of do that for you without having to be explicit about it.
Right. And Sarah, this is Suzanne. We also have the design review process where we can condition a site, you know, specific to each development to see what those are. And I think the other thing Sarah would point out as a reminder that it's all the uses enclosed inside of a building. So that greatly cuts down on the noise and the offsite impact.
Yeah, actually, and maybe this covers it with what you were saying, but Councilor Overs made me think that you have a brewery that has a very large brewery that has a tasting room, which would fall under this code, I would think, but could be very large because it's manufacturing and selling in the same premise, but it's, I mean, in the same area, same place, but it's very large.
Yeah, so again, I mean, right now, we don't have any parcels like that you could really do that, but this is a code that will apply to future rezone commercial land as well. So the way that we would address any negative impacts like truck traffic and deliveries and that kind of thing, because that's kind of what you're concerned about. Just thinking some of the breweries in Astoria down by the wharf that have these lovely tasting rooms. And so that would have to go to the planning commission for a review, and they could see, okay, where is your plan for access and where are the trucks going and how
Okay.
does that relate to any adjacent residential uses? Can we create landscape buffer yards? So we'd be able to do that through a conditioning process. So it's, yeah, do you want to try to anticipate that now, not knowing the specifics of development, or kind of let that be reviewed case by case as it goes through planning commission? So there's opportunity to do that.
Thanks. Great. Okay.
Okay,
No,
moving
no
on.
input there, Sarah. I think we'll let that go.
Okay, thank you. Oops. Oh boy, this one's a little bit tricky.
Which page are we on?
Oh, I'm sorry. We are on page 74 of the document. This is now, we are in your Main Street District zone, and this is the list of permitted uses for your Main Street zone. At the very top of the list is single detached housing, existing housing only. So existing housing is listed as a permitted use in your Main Street zone, and there is quite a bit of it, apparently. The concern that I had with this language is that if you have this language in your code and you're allowing existing housing as a permitted use, that housing is not non-conforming. Non-conforming uses, when they are destroyed by fire or other natural hazard, are allowed to be rebuilt. If you have a single detached home in your Main Street zone, the way it's worded now, that is not a non-conforming use. If that were to be destroyed by a fire or a natural hazard, you wouldn't necessarily be able to rebuild it. And so I was trying, I think, to understand from the Planning Commission, you know, when it comes to transitioning the Main Street district into a more commercially oriented district and getting a lot of those single family detached homes sort of turning over into commercial uses, which is what they're zoned for. How I guess, how aggressive does the city want to be about furthering that transition? If you have a lot of homes in that district, and which I think that you do, how quickly do you want those to be able to turn over, I guess? So I guess what I'm getting at is there's a couple different ways you can approach this. You can use your non-conforming standards. You can, I would take this language out, honestly, about existing. It's a strange thing to permit existing uses in a permitted use list. And I think it's complicated. I think if you wanted to make some adjustments, you would adjust your non-conforming use standards. The message that we got from the Planning Commission is, okay, we're not sure exactly how to do it logistically, but the intent is to help move that transition along as quickly as possible. We would like our Main Street district to be built out appropriately, and that means either transitioning the detached homes into commercial businesses, or tear down, rebuild new commercial businesses. And so that was the feedback that we got from them, was let's move that transition along, and let's let you figure out kind of what language goes along with that intent, I guess. I hope that makes sense. And
I'm seeing nods. I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense, yeah.
Good. Are there thoughts about that approach,
yes,
or about that intent, I guess?
And the question then, talking about why we put existing in this list, there are the other line items that refer to the same thing, right? The C and D that refer to existing single attached detached dwelling and manufactured home.
Yeah, and whatever approach we decide to take with A there, we would take also with C and D. We would
Thank
kind of
you.
treat them
Okay.
all the same.
Great.
Yeah.
That's B, C, and D. Okay, that's my question. So what do you think about that? Anyone? Speed up that transition?
So this is a tough nut because on one side you've got my house burned down, can I build it back? And on the other side, we were working on a Main Street program that specifically calls out, you got a lot of residential downtown that it would be nice to turn over. I would just hate to turn it over by having it catch fire. So it's as I say, it's a tough and circular nut to crack. I'm not sure how to approach it.
Obviously, we hope none of them ever catch fire, but just that's an example of a time in which it might then become a non-conforming. So, what other thoughts? Continue to allow those if something were to happen, to continue to allow them as housing, or go ahead and say nope if something happens to them. And I wouldn't say there are a lot, right? There
Yeah,
are
I
quite
was
a
wondering
few.
what's the count? Do you have any notion, Suzanne, off the top of your
I
head?
don't, there's a handful, I would say, on Main Street proper, right? But then the Main Street district goes out to the north side of south side of
That's
Jackson
true,
and
yeah.
north side
There's
of
more
Clay,
of them
right? So
there.
then you start
So,
to
yeah.
run into
No,
a
right, the
number
cross
of
street
them
houses
there.
and the back side
And the
of Clay.
problem is
Jackson.
like where we get the pushback, like the calls, the planner gets the calls when this
Uh-huh.
happens. When you tighten it up and you make it so that they can't build back,
Right.
is that now when it comes up is when they try to buy and sell property and they can't get the most competitive loans from the bank because the bank wants a property that can be, used
Right.
for what it's sold for and what they have a mortgage
Sure,
on.
sure,
So
sure.
they have to pay higher interest rates as a result of it
Hadn't
becoming,
thought about that.
they can't build it back. So that's where we hear that's the pain point. And it's not necessarily that it's going to burn down. So some of the ways that communities soften that a little bit is to say, okay, if it's not your fault that it burns down or a natural disaster, you've got 12 months to rebuild it or 6 months to rebuild it in the same footprint. But it doesn't make it go away any faster. So that's
All right,
the downside.
right.
Yes, Councilor McKeel.
But I am concerned that if somebody is trying to sell their home and then they're kind of stuck because now they can only have it as a commercial property, which limits the people who would be willing to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, and some people want it for that as the higher and better use. I mean, I'm not the real estate person, but like we had just across the street, right? There was a house in the Main Street district that turned into a salon. So, I mean, it can be done. It takes money to convert it, change of use, but some people
Well, and I
want,
think
they're running out of inventory, so it's becoming more of a demand, right?
And there are a number of houses on Main Street that are now businesses, right? So that used to be residences, I'm assuming, because they look like homes.
Right, and the house can still be there. It's just the use inside of it is no longer residential.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'd have to double check your non-conforming use standards, but I think somebody could sell the house, as a residence, and somebody else could move into it and live there as their home. They just wouldn't be able to expand it, and they wouldn't be able to. Sorry.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to.
They wouldn't be able to rebuild it if you made
Change
this
it.
really strict.
As a home.
And that's
Right.
That's
yeah.
where the bank has
But
the
they
rub.
could sell it as a home, and somebody could move into it as a home, as a residence.
Correct.
If they can get a loan.
If they can get a competitive
That's
loan.
the problem. This kind of turns a little piece of code into a hammer for changing things that without actually coming out and changing them. Make it harder to finance a purchase.
But it is a goal. It is a goal to make those changes. So you have to policies how you make the changes.
So I guess
Well, I think
maybe if we put it this way, like if you have sort of 3 levels of pushing the transition, kind of a low level, a medium level, and a high level. The high level means the cities are really pushing for it and your code is aggressive in that regard. Where would you land? Low, medium, or high? I think if we can get the intent, then we can figure out the right language to go with it.
I'm thinking about medium.
Yeah, that's sort of where I am too.
Something kind of in the middle that tries to strike a balance.
Encourages, but not,
Encouragement,
yeah.
yeah.
Encourage the
Yeah, I
transition.
think if planning is, I mean, planning, we also have, Main Street Committee and stuff. This isn't a final. So if we say, let's aim for medium, gives that little bit of flexibility and try to determine, but really maybe someday, some way incentivize those changes would be a better way to push it than hard line right here.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I think that we can figure out how to make this language here and in your non-conforming code reflect that. And that feels consistent with what we were hearing from the Planning Commission too. So I think we can, figure that out. Yeah, good.
Yes,
Thank you.
Councilor McKeel has a question.
Sorry.
Yes,
Sarah?
go ahead.
Sarah, were you saying something? Sorry. No, I guess. Okay. I was wondering why the townhouse and the duplex and triplex were on this list. I can see the multiple dwelling because that looks like we have downtown right now. But the townhouse and duplex and triplex looks smaller, similar to the single family house thing.
Yeah, I mean
Townhouse
that
would be a single 2 units.
was part of the whole I think first code package where we were really looking at housing and how can we open up the zones in Monmouth to new housing types, particularly these middle housing types, which these townhomes, duplex and triplex, those are considered the middle housing types of units. So it's partially to open up the option for this type of housing to be built in your Main Street district, which can be done in a way that is appropriate to a Main Street district. I will also say that I'm sorry, I don't have it up here. You have some purpose language for your Main Street district that talks about residential uses. And this feels pretty consistent with that purpose language. I'm sorry that I don't have it up here now. That said, you could argue, I think, probably particularly with a duplex, that is very similar to a single detached home, and perhaps that's not an appropriate use to include here. So I think that is.
If we're trying to make a conversion that we just got done talking about, and then we're saying we're trying to get rid of single, but we can put in duplexes and triplexes. I love townhouses if they're defined as a certain number of units.
Yeah, or a row house type thing.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. When I say a townhouse, I'm talking about 0 lot line,
right.
4, say, versus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, especially like you say, a duplex. Some of the houses on Main Street that are single now could be duplexes, and we still wouldn't necessarily want them there as that use. So.
Sorry, and just one point to clarify, Sarah. So remember, there's a special residential use standards later on in that chapter. That you have to have that residential with commercial. So you couldn't just have a standalone duplex in the Main Street district.
Okay.
You've got to have the commercial tucked underneath. So
yeah,
I think we think of a duplex, right, as a 1-story side by side, but you could have 2 units up above a
You
commercial
specify
office.
second story, I'm good.
Yeah, we don't have it saying
language.
it has to be on the second floor, but there could be language that's.
And we're trying to get rid of ground floor housing on Main Street downtown anyway, and move those upstairs.
Yeah, and I did notice that. I was happy to see the upper floor.
Yeah.
But yeah, duplex to me is like 2, but maybe it's.
I'm trying to find that language, but there's language in here that if you do have residential in the Main Street district, there's language that says it has to be above or behind the commercial use.
So it's page 87, Sarah.
Thank you.
90.110.
You're good.
I've had to look at that section before, so I know.
I'm impressed. I was going to search it.
87?
Yeah, 87. It's under 18.90.110. 2A, mixed-use development required.
There it is.
Mhm.
Sure enough. It's in black instead of red for a
Okay,
change.
yeah, that's,
Sarah.
I didn't see it. I just,
Yeah.
yes, okay, yes, okay. So that language, I think, takes care of part of that concern because the residential would not be facing the main street. It would be sort of subsequent to or to the commercial use. And now I need to get back to where I was. Where was I?
Although it just says multifamily buildings and attached townhouses. Wait, where does it say on Main Street?
I just had to make
Says all residential developments shall comply with the standards. So I think it captures it
Oh,
in that
80.
next sentence.
Okay. All right, moving down. I see. All right.
Okay. So with
All right,
those
Sarah,
parameters-
sorry.
That's okay. No, it's good. So with those parameters in mind, are we okay leaving these types of residential uses in the Main Street district, knowing that there are limitations on
Yes.
where they can put it?
Yes.
Okay.
Nod.
I think maybe if the language said duplexes and triplexes allowed, if they comport with the language in that later section so that somebody who's not Suzanne
Yeah, can find
would
it.
know that it's there.
That connection.
Yeah, that was our goal, was to make you not look 5 places for this
Right.
information.
Yeah, but so if you do have to look, at least
Yeah.
point yourself at it.
Yeah, that's
So
a good
that you-
good idea. We can add a reference to that section in these for those uses. Okay.
Back up.
This is about drive-throughs. We're still in your Main Street district. Right now, new drive-through uses are allowed in your Main Street zone. There are standards that they have to adhere to that are mostly intended to, address queuing and traffic and access issues. My recommendation is that drive-through uses not be permitted in your Main Street district because this is really an area where you're trying to promote walkability and have that really nice, consistent Main Street storefront walkable area. And so my recommendation to the Planning Commission was let's think about maybe just not allowing drive-through uses in your Main Street district. And the consensus from the Planning Commission was yes, let's not allow those. So let's disallow drive-through uses. And so that is what we would like to move forward with. Are there comments or questions from this group?
No, I concur.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Generally
interesting.
agree.
I could talk about Jackson and Clay with wider streets that could more easily, and they're not make the state highway, which we know we also can't add a bunch of driveways
Right.
to that part of Main Street.
Mhm.
But I think, again, to encourage the kinds of businesses and
Right.
walking we want, that's probably something we would want to limit.
Every driveway that crosses a sidewalk in the downtown district lowers the walkability of the downtown
Yeah.
at some level.
Councilor Belts?
Does that include the banks?
That would include bank.
Well, right now,
They have it.
they have it, right.
drive-through.
It would
But if a
not
new bank-
apply to new banks.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, it would only apply to new banks.
Oh, right.
Existing drive-throughs would be able to stay, but they would become non-conforming. So again, if they were destroyed, they would not be able to rebuild a drive-through use, but they could stay as long as they didn't change.
Okay, thank you.
So if the driveway burns, they can't rebuild it.
Yeah, so the drivers are already
They
there.
rebuilt the
Yeah,
driveway.
there's,
Yeah, and the parking lots are there. So.
Yeah.
Okay, think we're good with that one?
Okay. Making good time. This is an interesting, again, this is in your Main Street district. So now we're at page 79 of the document. There is some existing language in here that says that buildings have to be no more than 45 feet high. That's your height limit. Then it says the building height increase for housing shall apply only to that portion of the building that contains housing. But this building height increase is not defined or discussed or mentioned anywhere else in the code. I think the intent was probably to do something more with that, and it just didn't happen. So my question to Planning Commission was, what do we want to do about this? Do we want to keep it or and build the language around it or not? And the feedback from Planning Commission was, let's remove that language entirely. Their thinking was that buildings along Main Street shouldn't be more than 45 feet in height, and that if they wanted to do a taller building, that they would go the variance path basically.
Right.
But that they did not think that the city should provide a building height bonus for residential.
Suzanne, how tall is Monmouth Commons?
They maxed it out. It's 45 feet.
45 feet.
Yeah.
So Monmouth Commons is an example of a 45-foot building.
Really? Wow. I looked it up. Google said it's 3 stories.
It's 4.
Yeah, three stories of housing and then the main floor. So it's actually 4 stories.
Yeah.
Yep, we agree with that one. Get rid of orphan language.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay. All right, last one. Save the best for last. Parking.
What page are we on?
We are on page 91. Most of the changes here are changes that we talked about during the first code package, which have to do with residential uses and parking standards for residential uses. My question for this round was, does the city want to establish some by right parking reductions? For example, if you are located in close proximity to transit service that provides frequent, we can define that how we want, transit service, do you want to allow an automatic reduction in your minimum parking requirement of, say, 10%, 20%? Or if somebody is near a regional trail, or there's great bike amenities, or they put in extra bike head amenities, could they be allowed to have an automatic reduction to their required minimums? So that's the kind of thing that I was talking about. The Planning Commission feedback was that they didn't think this was the right time for those reductions. I personally would recommend continuing to consider it, especially knowing that you have a trolley line coming in soon that is going to be providing some pretty amazing service. It's free, it's frequent, it runs 10, 12 hours a day, every 20 minutes. I mean, it's better transit service than I have at my house in Northeast Portland, which is super exciting, and it's coming soon. So I think if you had some language in your code that said you could have this reduction for transit, and set the parameters where you want to set them, it's not precluding people from building more parking. It's just reducing the minimum requirement to support, again, that sort of multimodal biking, walking, connectivity approach. So what are your thoughts?
Councilor Oberst has an observation. I'm guessing Councilor Belts will want to weigh in on this as well.
I love the trolley. I hope this works. We have 2 years of funding for the trolley. And at the end of those 2 years, we're going to have to figure out how to keep it running. And if we are allowing reductions in parking based on a 2-year mass transit system, I'm not sure that works.
Well, keep in mind
in addition, Sarah, this is a rural community. While people can move around the community on mass transit, even with Councilor Belz's wonderful employer in Salem, it's still hard to get around much outside this community with mass transit. And people do have cars as a result. This is not Portland. This is not Portland suburbs. This is a little spot of 12,000, well, I'll throw Independence in and say 22,000, surrounded by a lot of farm fields. And I would love to say, yes, let's give a reduction for mass transit, but I'm just not sure that it works yet. And that's where I think planning said, let's hold this in abeyance for now. It's something we can come back to.
Councilor Belts and then Councilor McKeel.
Well, you all know I would certainly advocate for a reduction. There's a variety of reasons, and you all know them. Let's save some space. Let's encourage the use of transportation options, which is not just transit, but bike,
Yeah.
walkability. I actually do respect the decision that the Planning Commission recommended, especially knowing that Stephen Howard probably advocated pretty hard for the same thing I'm advocating for.
He did.
However, I want to keep this on our radar, and perhaps now is not the right time. And I actually agree with you, Councilor Oberst, because we just don't have the permanent funding yet set up for the trolley.
Right.
But I want to talk about this every single year.
Okay.
So I am
I'm
okay
game.
not adding it now if that's okay.
Counselor McKeel?
As someone who rides the bike here, I would have to agree this is premature. Again, for a rural community, and I think there needs to be other incentives involved with having people decrease their bike use or their car usage, not bike usage.
Vehicle usage. Yeah.
Yeah, and right now it's very difficult to get from here to Salem or Corvallis, and you're stuck with your car. So,
Yeah.
but hopefully as we become more and more concerned with climate change, that there'll be more incentives to give up your car. And ride your bicycle to the city council meeting. No, sorry.
And Sarah, I heard a two-pronged approach. One is put the limits in place based on proximity to transit. The other, the next comment, allow a new procedure for a parking determination to allow adjustments to parking requirements if certain criteria are met. So that sounds more like a way for the developer to ask, to say, if I put in locking bike things and I do this and this and this, may I offer less parking? Is that what that means?
Yes, and thank you. That is where I was going next. That'll be part of the next code package 3, which we're working on now and actually talking about tomorrow. Not with council. And yeah, that'll be probably a type 2 procedure. So somebody could request an adjustment to the parking standard based on their particular circumstances, and they'd probably have to provide some sort of parking study or some sort of demand supply analysis, and that would be a staff decision.
Okay, thanks. So that will come up next. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Oh, and so to address that, I would like to see, that's the kind of inducement that we should have at every apartment complex, period. Whether or not they get a reduction in parking spaces because they have a parking place for their bikes, they all need to have a parking place for their bikes, because that would be the encouragement for people to ride bicycles.
We have also, and I don't know if you saw this, but we have added bike parking standards that would require new multifamily to have bike parking on site.
Coming up. Yep.
Of course. There it is. Yeah.
Page 94.
What would really be good is if that was covered bike parking, because this is Oregon.
Oh, well.
Right. I didn't see a bike cage in that, though. Maybe I missed it.
Page 94.
No.
Parking places.
All right.
Okay. So I'll keep my screen up, but those were the 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. Those were the things that we talked with Planning Commission about. I will say, and I think Suzanne mentioned this, the Planning Commission had a lot more comments. We didn't have time to get through them all. They're meeting again tomorrow night to talk through some of their comments specifically. So more to come on this code package. But are there any other things that caught your eyes?
Yes. I'll let somebody else go first.
Go ahead. You had something.
So I'm going to go all the way. I hate to do this to you, but to the very top of this package and to page 1, where we have thrust at us the skinny street standard that was rejected by the city about 15 years ago when DLCD tried to turn it into a safe harbor that you could only do 28-foot streets unless you got special dispensation. And here it comes again. I look at the illustration, and it is optimistic at best with the number of vehicles parked on the street and the notion that a driveway is going to have that kind of width when people in this community drive lots of very large vehicles, including things from the new style tall, long vans to tall, long pickup trucks that would not fit into tuck into a driveway while somebody passes going the other way. And I find a 28-foot street width to be really problematic. Again, rural community. And I feel like, I'm not sure where this comes from, but it does feel like it's being pushed at us a little without recognition of our realities. Then we have places later in the code we've talked about where we're going to allow people to not have to build off-street parking. So we're going to have, you don't have to have off-street parking, and you're going to have 28-foot streets. And all you have to do is look at the street, and I cannot remember the street name right now, but it's across from Ash Creek School, parallels 16th Street, where we allowed a skinny street with parking on one side. And there's not enough parking for the neighborhood. If you allowed parking on both sides, you couldn't get through there. Certainly fire equipment couldn't. And I understand there's a refuge for fire equipment here. But I'm just really troubled by a 28-foot street. I can see if our current streets are 36, is that right, Suzanne? Right. And I could see maybe even 32, maybe even 30, but going all the way down to 28 starts to get a little snug for me.
I will point out.
That one worries me.
I'll make note of your comments, but I do want to point out that this is a specific standard. This is a narrow street standard for new residential PUDs. So
and
to use
we have
this
a
standard,
new residential PUD kind of maybe proposed, and it might be full of 28-foot streets. So
I get my point. My point is that because it's a PUD, it's going through a discretionary review process. Your planning commission and city council will both be looking at it, and there's an opportunity to make a determination during the review process about whether or not about the appropriateness of that particular cross section for that particular PUD development. So this isn't a all new streets and PUDs are going to be this cross section. This is an option that is available if it is the right choice for that developer.
Right.
So I just want to make that point that this is.
I understand the reasons for doing it as far as pedestrians and so on, but just in general,
Getting more houses
I can't get there.
on the lot, getting more houses in the property.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
And this is part of that continuing drive for density at the expense of livability sometimes, in my opinion. So,
but if I could concur with that, I work at Corvallis, and I was on 11th Street, and I was going one way. There was and I have a small car. Another small car was going this way. If that other car had been a truck with my we would have not been able to make it. So it is a problem. 2 trucks would have definitely not made it.
All right, so noted. Any other overall comments for Sarah or Ryan?
Sorry, yes, but I'll defer. You
go ahead and finish your list.
You go ahead. You're on.
I'm on page 21, and I just I'm assuming you removed Beaverton from the food lot thing. Anyway, I know you will. But there was my question really was the restroom requirement and hand washing for the food cart, if they had anything available. And I know that there are food carts in town, at least one. It has a picnic table, and I'm not sure why we would need to have a restroom at a food cart.
I'm sorry. Can you tell me the page that you're on again? I don't have a page.
I have
I think
page 21. Sorry, that's 21 of our packet. Hold on a second.
So
sorry.
Sarah, they're the Beaverton food cart regulations.
Yeah.
Oh, it says
Did they get
page
inserted
21
into
on
this
the
document?
They did.
I'll get it for you.
Okay.
It's
So they're
my
not
document.
I'm not using your packet. I'm using that's fine. I'm familiar with the standards. I
it's
forgot.
right
that
after page 7 of your document, Sarah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the insert.
It's on page.
It's after their page 7. It's not numbered.
It's not marked, is it?
No.
No, it's between pages 7 and 8.
It's not in the document that I'm sharing right now. it got inserted into the packet document. But I know what the standards are, so I understand where we are now. But I missed your question. I'm sorry.
No, so
Restrooms.
it had in here that if a food cart supplies a seating area, that they have to have a restroom, and then with that, hand washing. And I was wondering why we needed to have a restroom with a food cart, when they just like grab your lunch and sit down at a picnic table, and like you could have gone like another block and gone down to the city park.
Yeah, and you don't. Again, these are sort of example. This is example language from City of Beaverton. There aren't a whole lot of example codes to pull from. Beaverton, I think, is a good start, but I feel like it's also pretty prescriptive and probably more than what Monmouth needs. But I think that we could pull some of the basics from it and use that. And so the requirement to have a bathroom, does not need to be part of Monmouth's code if it doesn't seem appropriate. And we don't want to create barriers where barriers are not necessary. We want to be able to encourage these types of uses. Beaverton's code is pretty prescriptive, and I don't think we want to take it quite to that level.
So I guess one more in that, just to put it on radar, is the, excuse me, FAII, have a maximum of 50% of the structure enclosed with walls or sides. I think might be a little too prescriptive as well.
Agreed. Yeah. I'm just going to make a note in this
I have
document.
a couple more, but we'll just keep moving around.
Those are my questions for
okay.
food cart as well as the restrooms and yeah.
Counselor Belts. Oh, go ahead.
I have a couple more, but if you want to just do round robin.
I just want to comment on exactly what you're commenting on. The very first line in this says site design standard for food cart pods. Yeah. That does, to me, indicate multiple food carts in one area. So that's why, if you're going to have 5 food carts, it would be kind of nice to have a restroom facility. So perhaps that's why it was specific in this, but it wasn't clear in this either.
Okay.
I would think as we develop a code section for Monmouth, we would probably have a short section of standards for an individual standalone cart, and then a section for a pod. And we can define pod as like 3 or more, 4 or more. We can kind of figure out where that's appropriate. And that's where you might want to start thinking about requiring some of those amenities, because then it becomes like this destination. Yeah.
Okay, Carol, others?
Yeah, I was on page 13 on your document, so I got the right page number this time. It talks about boarding and rooming houses, and I was wondering what constitutes a boarding house, because I know there's lots of college students that are like rooming. There's also people that rent a room to students. And I'm wondering if that's something we want to actually, being that we're a college town, I'm wondering if that's something that we don't want to necessarily have so tightly confined. Page 13, it's just on the list. And then I think there's an explanation of what a boarding house is.
All it's saying is that it's a permitted use in a residential zone. That's what it's referring to in this section. So.
And then it defines how many roomers you can have down next.
Yeah, which is
3 in a medium
5
density zone and 5 in the high.
Yeah, because it's distinguishing it between a hotel and
I see.
Long term. Yeah, more like.
Yeah. Oh, I see what.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's single homes, people with, I have a single home, but I could see renting it out to a couple of college students when my husband leaves me. Oh, sorry. And the same thing I was also wondering about the residential facility. So I know that there's homes in town for developmental adults. I'm assuming that those are residential homes.
Residential facilities.
Yeah.
Home would be 5 or fewer, I think, is the licensing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh no, there's 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 two different uses there. There's residential homes and residential facilities. They're defined by the state, and it's based on number of people that
Okay,
are in the
all right.
facility. Yeah.
And actually, there's a footnote on 14, Carol. Total number of boarders or roomers shall not exceed 3 in the RM zone and 5 in the RH zone. So those are defined, boarding
Yeah.
houses and rooming houses, as to how many folks.
And I saw those and I thought, well, I don't know, I guess, you could have, in my house, I have extra bedrooms, but maybe I'm being more,
Well, you're in a PUD, so it's,
Yeah, it's true.
I like to party with people. On page 75, 2C, it talks about parking lots, and I'd have to go back and read it, but I have my note to myself is the city plan that we're also working on is talking about removing parking lots, and I think this one was the having them come in, how to deal with the parking lots.
Page 75 in my
And
document.
Yeah,
No,
that's-
I have two numbers, page 91.
It
It's
might be
my
90.
document is 91. Hold on a
Yeah,
second.
that's
So
75
Sarah, it's
for
the list
hers,
of
yeah.
permitted
Oh,
uses,
at the
the
top,
Main Street District.
number C.
Oh.
That is again
Right.
about.
Public parking lots and garages, Main Street accepted.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that it conflicts with what we're trying to do with the city plan that we're working on as well.
Well, it says Main Street's accepted, so we
So
can,
if this would allow us to put a public parking lot in the Main Street district,
Right.
except on Main Street itself.
Right.
So, for example, if that parking lot that Western owns, they wanted to become a public parking lot, it would be allowed. That's
Okay.
what this is about.
Right, but I think in
Or a
our city
parking
plan,
garage.
we're trying to remove parking lots, I think, right? In that
But we just don't,
developmental
we
plan?
want to create on the Main Street proper a continuous, streetscape of buildings up
Right.
to
Right.
the sidewalk and then tuck the parking behind or to the side is kind of, so we recognize we'll still need, some parking, but just trying to place that
Okay.
not on the Main Street, so you don't
Okay,
take
so
away
this
from
isn't
that.
contradicting that other plan? that
Nope,
we're working on?
nope, this
No,
is consistent with it,
the
actually.
downtown.
Yeah, this is helping implement that, so, yeah.
Yeah.
good.
All right.
Sorry, it took me a minute to catch up, but it sounds like they are in alignment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I just have a question about a half a car space with the multi-family, but maybe somebody else has that as well. It's like, I guess if you
Those
live in a
are really small
multi-family
facility-
thing, you don't have a car.
well, it's 500 square feet, so that would be a really small residential facility.
It's a
Yeah.
small
Still
studio,
have a car.
basically.
I think the same holds true. It's a rural city and people have cars. So,
You also have a university that's really close to your downtown area, and I think, the thinking is that if somebody's building with that customer in mind, it's a lot more feasible that some of those students are not going to have a car or they're not going to want to use a car. Again, these are minimums, so somebody who is building with a different clientele in mind can put in more than the minimum. But all these minimums sort of allow some flexibility to think about, other approaches and kind of moving toward a more walkable, bikeable area.
And I just want to,
they're not intended to try to sort of push that approach, but they are opening up the possibility for that approach. I guess that's what I'm saying. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah. And this is Ryan Markwart with the LCD. I just wanted to add that there is census data that we can provide to the Planning Commission for future meetings here. But basically, short story is about a third of rental households in Monmouth have 1 or 0 cars. I know that's probably kind of counter to what you might expect or guess, but there are a significant number of households that don't need more than 1 parking space. So this is kind of saying you don't have to overbuild for those households. And as Sarah pointed out, it's a minimum. If the developer wants to provide spaces for 3 F-150s because they think that's what people are going to have, they can do that. But this is just saying you're not requiring that additional. So I'll stop at that point.
Well, the demographics are helpful. Thank you.
Counselor Oberst.
Counselor Oberst?
And I'll just push back just a hair on students not having cars. Have you seen the size of the parking lots around the dorms?
All right.
So I want to go back up towards the top again on page 5. The former Speaker Kotek had a pet bill that basically says if you're a city over 10,000, you have to allow duplexes wherever single dwelling units are allowed now, and that would include in new construction and old construction. I'm going to channel Counselor Carey here just a second. Page 5.
Yeah, the problem is the document that I'm looking at doesn't have any of the residential stuff in it because that was part of code package number 1. So I just have to get to the
because we talked last time about the number of ADUs that are allowed, and there was a lot of discussion around allowing 1 or allowing 2 per single, and we're sitting here looking at 2 again. And
okay, I'm there now.
Yeah, Counselor Carey and I can, I think I can speak for John. I always hesitate to. It gets me in trouble when I try. But he was not a big fan of 2 ADUs being allowed either. And it's a big change for what a neighborhood that has been traditional single housing to suddenly be faced with the possibility that people could start turning those into 2-unit properties. And then all of a sudden here we're going towards the 25,000 population standard of allowing 3 and 4, because we're allowing 3 dwelling units on what has traditionally been a single. Have less trouble with this if it was only new construction, but it's not. And to allow 3 units on what was a single unit property, this is a Portland solution, I'm sorry, but for a rural community. I'm not convinced. This is one of those ones that would make me, I hate to say this, but really dig in my heels on this whole package. I just don't see this being, look, Sarah, when I was on the Planning Commission and we started this whole thing that long ago, I always felt like you all were consulting with us on trying to move this thing forward. This particular piece feels more like being consulted at. And I'm not sure if this is you guys or if this is coming down from state or what, but I just, the 2 ADUs in a house on a lot, just, I can't get there. I just can't.
John, we all talked about it as a group. I don't feel like that's something they put in there, but we
talked about it as a group, and my sense was that the group was not real sure about it.
So
to the point of not real sure. And I'm just saying that to me, this is a real problem with this document.
You said that last time. So Suzanne?
Yeah, sorry, Sarah, I was just going to jump in here. So yes, and I heard those comments that came through, I think, at Planning Commission as well. And so I guess I would just point out, and Sarah, you can clarify as well, this draft, the first package that we talk about, doesn't have your feedback changes made to it yet. So we're collecting them all, and then it's going to come back to you again for another joint work session with the Planning Commission to go through those. So we
like last go at it.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry if that was the.
That's why Sarah said she doesn't even have that stuff in front of her, because that was what we talked about last.
We're not supposed to be talking about that tonight.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, it's in my packet, so I'm talking about it. I'm sorry.
There was a mix-up, which is fine. And Suzanne's correct that comments that we've received on Code Package 2 haven't been incorporated into a next draft yet. That is yet to come. So that's part of why you're not seeing that reflected in there. The other thing I will say is, when we talked about this with Planning Commission, which was the last conversation I had, there was, again, some concern, but the consensus was, the thinking was, let's keep it in there, and knowing that there will be further discussion. So that is why it's still in there. I do want to ask you, do you feel the same way about a triplex in your single detached zones? Is there a distinction in your mind between somebody putting in a new triplex, which we're also recommending be allowed, versus,
I think if you have an existing neighborhood full of single dwellings,
Mhm.
you allow a duplex that starts a bunch of duplexes, frankly, because every lot could happen. Not likely, but possible. That changes the character of that neighborhood. And if you now go to triplexes or a house with 2 ADUs, that exacerbates that change in character.
You should see the triplex in the Edwards edition.
No, I know. I've seen them,
Would not
Steve.
know from the front that it is not a single family.
Right. No, I have seen them, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the design. And I'm talking about an existing neighborhood where it has been built out like that for 50 years. And now you're going to make a major change, and
And
it
as
just
you
doesn't
say-
feel good.
As you say, some of that is being legislated, and there will be changes, right?
Yeah, no.
We do allow ADUs, which weren't allowed before, so there are changes. And
Yep.
you're right, we can certainly take our time at this, and we have another opportunity to comment on this. So I appreciate your reminder of your position on that, Councilor Oberst. But was there any other comments on this? We'll let Sarah.
That's it.
and
But again, I
Ryan
would
go.
have held fire, except that this felt like the last shot at this, and this was in our packet. So
Not at all.
I had at it. Sorry.
Yes.
That's okay. Yeah, there will be another draft. There will be another work session.
We'll have
I
an
guess
open house for-
two more work sessions. Yeah, and some broader community engagement before we move into the adoption version and the adoption process.
Thank you. Councilor Belts had one more thing for you.
So this is in the code package number 2. It is on your page 86, and I don't know if this is necessary to make the change, but in letter D, letter D.
Scrivener's error.
Yes, where it says, city's transportation plan and guidelines established by the Chemeketa Area Regional Transportation System. That's CARTS. CARTS does not exist anymore. The service that was provided by CARTS is now Chariots, and it's called Chariots Regional. I don't know if you just need to say CARTS now Chariots Regional, whatever it is, but that just
Or
doesn't.
Salem Kaiser
Area Mass
Transit.
Transit District, SAMTD. Anyway, so there you go.
Expertise.
That's why you have Mrs. Transportation
CARTS
here.
is no longer. It may be that we should put in some more generic language like regional transit provider.
I'm sure you can work with Suzanne on what the
Yeah.
right word is.
We flagged that.
I just want to make sure we don't have an archaic term. in there.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for catching that.
Oh, sure, actually. Mayor Kuntz saw it first and pointed it out to me, so.
Like, I don't think that's called that. All right.
Thank
Anything else?
Good, thanks.
Thank you, Sarah and Ryan, for joining us once again and for this amazing work. And
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, thanks to all of you, and you'll be seeing more to come.
All right, thanks.
Great, thank
Have
you.
a good night. Bye.
Thanks, Suzanne. Typically, we'd take a 5-minute break here at 8 o'clock. Do folks want to do that since none of us are online? We're all in person. We take 5 minutes.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, water, de-water.
4 minutes. Can you take 4 minutes? Okay. Yes, thank you.
Are we on the last couple things? Trolley and then.
The noise complaint.
Okay. Okay, trolley and then nice. Okay. All right. Good.
So did you see, you're probably too busy, the EI training that the LOC is offering?
Is it through Western?
Yeah,
Yes, I saw that.
Marty said she'd pay for it.
I was thinking about maybe not the class,
Yeah,
but.
just the one day thing?
I'm thinking I don't know if I can get it. I was also thinking of asking Chemeketa to pay for it as a training.
Oh, and
but-
Marty said she'd cover it.
Okay.
And I was looking at the 20-hour thing because I think the one day thing, I couldn't do it.
I have to look at the date. I was interested,
Because the 20-hour thing looked like it was on. Hey, John, I don't know if you are.
I'm not.
Oh, no,
What?
if you were thinking of doing the training for the DEI training that
It's through
Western is providing, there's one coming up with LOC.
Yeah.
And Marty said that the city would pay for it. Because I couldn't do it last time.
I'm gonna.
I'll have to think about that.
It's see if I can do send. Marty.
This is going to sound real funky, but a very close African friend of mine said that we're the most woke white family he's ever met.
We can always be more woke.
I work at it and I'll think about it, but
I run conversations on race once a month.
Right, I know you do.
It's I mean, I don't mean to pressure you, okay?
Right.
But it's the one thing that we have to constantly do, or the culture puts us back to sleep.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so this is the when I was looking at. There's a 1-day thing. Oh yeah, but I'm going to be gone that day. And then there's the 8-week course.
In the bathroom.
But that looked like it was
Not used to having 4 women on.
live through Zoom. Oh, but it doesn't have any time.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll think of it.
That's cool that you have somebody compliment you. But I think we still have to do stuff.
Okay. Yep.
What I thought about this was it would give us like a common language.
Sure.
We more than just one of my favorite, and I'm fine doing it by myself.
I'll be back.
Okay. Did you see the Jedi training?
Oh, yeah.
That came out with LOC. Marty said she would pay for it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the Lake Oregon City.
My legs. We have a couple more things.
What's that?
We have a couple more things, Charlie, and then.
Yeah.
All right.
I know.
Oh, hi. We took public comment earlier this evening at the beginning of the meeting.
I was told it was supposed to be at 7:30 or later. It's on your website.
Oh, the public comment would be taken at 7:30?
Yes, or later.
Oh, huh.
And that's on your
Okay.
website.
Sorry, because it's typically right at the top of the meeting.
That's what I read on the website.
Right. We are reseated. So we will return to our agenda and an update on the Monmouth Independence Trolley. Our city manager, Marty Won.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Phyllis to please allow me to be a presenter so that I can share my screen.
I've already made you presenter, Marty.
I'm sorry?
I've already made you presenter.
Let's see. It's not, let's see.
I don't see where it is either. The three
How
dots.
is this showing?
Yes.
Thanks.
There we go.
So, Council, I just have a briefing and a presentation for you tonight. There's not any action requested of you. It's been a while. I think you've been hearing about the trolley service that is coming soon. As a matter of fact, it was mentioned in the last presentation. I wanted to just give you some of the background leading up. We're going to start talking a little bit more about this service coming to town. And as we do that, I wanted you to have information just about what's been happening behind the scenes. And I say behind the scenes only because the last time you heard about this the trolley service was during the budget process when we created a transit fund to receive grant funds to provide the trolley service. So tonight I just wanted to give you a brief update about what's been going on so that you'll have a sense when you start hearing about it in the community about a little bit about what's going on. So tonight I will be quick about this, but I'll take you back a few years. Work has been underway since 2019 to provide a feasibility study. There's been talk in the community about that it would be nice to have a transit service that was potentially more localized than what our regional transit provider provides. And so back in 2018 and 19, we collaborated with the City of Independence to hire someone to help us study whether or not a trolley service, and at the time it was about a local transit or a circulator service, would be feasible in our community. We put together a feasibility study that was completed in 2020. It talked about different route concepts, some ideas about what a service might cost, and some different models for the way it might be implemented, and asked about vehicle types. And I think that what we heard from our community was that there was a wish for whatever the vehicle looked like to look like a trolley. So our state legislators, Senator Deb Patterson and Representative Paul Evans, provided a grant of state American Rescue Plan funding of $3 million back in 2021 to take the next step after the feasibility study, and said, Monmouth and Independence, go forth and figure out what this service might actually look like. So building off of the feasibility study that we did, we put together a working group of the agencies that I've been talking about: City of Monmouth, City of Independence, Western Oregon University, which operates the Wolf Ride, Chariots, which is a regional service provider, and started talking about how to take the next step on the feasibility study. What we knew, and this was referenced by Councilor Oberst in the prior presentation, what we knew was that $3 million when it came to implementing a transit service when we didn't have any now, we'd have to see what would happen with that, especially if Chariots doesn't operate trolley vehicles, and they don't. So we knew we'd have to buy vehicles, we'd have to pay an operator to run the service, and that $3 million would, at a certain point, we'd need to figure out if the service was sustainable, how to continue it. So this working group has been working together since 2021, and it consists of a staff group who's doing planning for the service. The goals of the feasibility study and also of the service planning as it's been coming together were to make connections, a frequent transit connection between our two cities and the university. The idea was also that having a localized transit and circulator service could help with visitor trips, with student trips, with shopping, folks getting to jobs and trying to reach the campus, and also our two cities' downtowns. The idea was also to provide more frequent access to transit than we were receiving from Chariots. And we knew that we were going to define this as a demonstration project because we only had a certain amount of the grant funds that were provided to us. So what's been coming together on a service plan for the trolley? You actually heard Sarah Sarah did a great job of describing what the service plan is coming together. The idea is the service would run every 20 minutes. And it would run between our two towns, the downtown Monmouth and downtown Independence. And we'd be aiming for frequent service where at any stop in the system, you would know that you'd be able to pick up a trolley every 20 minutes. The idea is that we would have 2 trolleys in service running between the 2 towns, and it would run 7 days a week. Frequent service and also running from early in the morning until middle of the evening. And I'll talk a little bit about the route in a minute. Because we are partnering with Chariots on the service plan, we're talking about sharing the existing stops that we have for the 40 and 45, 40X and 45 service with Chariots, and then adding some stops. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. The idea we also toyed with, we tried to figure out if we could make this a fully on-demand service so that anybody in the community could call and have the trolley come to closer to where they were to pick them up. And we realized that would require a bigger fleet and a bunch more operating hours. And so we're going to be using Chariots on-demand service it's a reservation service in advance, so 24 hours in advance. The trolley will be able to go off the fixed route to be able to pick people up by reservation. So we're working on an intergovernmental agreement with Chariots to be the operator, because if you were to look around at our city staffs, you would not find any bus operators anywhere on our staff. And we recognize that we don't own these vehicles today, and taking care of them, probably Chariots knows more about it than we do. And we set a target date for beginning the service this fall. So and I'll talk about the vehicles in a minute as well. We've ordered 3 vehicles, our small transit trolley fleet, and those will be delivered soon. They're delayed at the factory, much like many things in today's economy. But we were the original plan the hope was that we could start the service at the time the university is back in session and students were coming back, and we're not going to be able to meet that target. But the idea is that we think that the grant that we provided for trolley service, or that we were provided for trolley services, will, together with the investment in vehicles, take us for a pilot project for 2 years. And the idea is that we would run the service in order to demonstrate the feasibility, figure out how it worked. There will no doubt be bugs and things that we're going to learn that we'll need to fix. But the idea is to evaluate the feasibility of this service between our 2 communities. So the company that we've ordered the vehicles from is called Hometown Trolley. And I mentioned that we ordered 3 vehicles. I've got all of their pictures in here, and so people have asked me, is this what the trolley is going to look like? And the answer is yes. What I'm showing you is the version of their trolley is called the carriage trolley, and it's a low emission vehicle, so it's built on a hybrid chassis, and it also has accessibility for someone who is in a wheelchair or lower mobility, and it can seat up to 16 people. Did I also say, I'm going to go back to that slide. We've been notified by Hometown Trolley that our order, which we placed in March, is now due in mid-October. So I keep calling the factory and asking how it's going, and I'm hopeful that they're going to be able to meet a delivery that still is in this fall. The route for the trolley, as I mentioned, follows in large part the stops that our current 40X and 45 route run between Independence and Monmouth. There are 12 stops. 4 of them are co-located with Chariot stops, and we've put in an application with the Department of Transportation to add stops along the way. We need their permission to be able to add stops along the way. And our goal was that folks who are walking to the fixed route will be able to have a stop within every quarter mile, which is a more walkable. The idea is that it's not so far that somebody couldn't walk to either the next stop or to somewhere along the route. And at the moment, we've got, I think I've put here are the stops on this page. So we have starting on the Monmouth side of things, the terminus of the route is on Jackson on the corner of the university. We're talking about stops on Main and Warren Street, although I think those are going to be the hardest to get ODOT permits for. And so we've been talking about rethinking those locations and making the terminus or the way the bus turns around at a different spot. There's a current stop at Eccles Street already at Main Street. There's another current Chariot stop at Heffley or Atwater Street. There's another current Chariot stop at Roth's at the S curve, and then one at Talmadge Road. And then as you head into Independence, there's one across from Central High School at the Plaza Shopping Center. And Independence is also conceiving of stops along Monmouth Street at 12th and 8th Street, 5th, and then with a turnaround for the bus near Riverview Park on the Independence side. So there are some things that are going to affect the stop locations. I mentioned some of them, which is, I think, the biggest determinant is what the Oregon Department of Transportation is going to allow. And they are concerned about things like removing parking spaces. The same thing, we're concerned about that as well within the downtown, because we recognize that there are impacts to nearby businesses if parking is less available, particularly on Main Street. We're trying to figure out how the trolley can move in and out of bus zones if they are new stops, and we have that to figure out. And also, those of you who are on social media might have seen that we have been doing some name the trolley questions and branding questions about a logo, and so our hope is that we'll have amenities at each stop that include a seat, perhaps a shelter, a bike rack, or and a pole that's branded with the trolley logo. And there will be places on the terminus of either side of the trolley line that is a layover zone, if, in terms of keeping the trolley schedule on, or keeping the trolley on schedule. And I just mentioned that we've had a survey out for a couple of weeks on social media asking the community to weigh in on some ideas about the ways that we might brand the trolley. We're working now to put together marketing materials that describe what the trolley is going to look like and the kind of service it's going to provide. And I think once we feel more sure about the trolleys being delivered, we're going to probably put some of those marketing materials out, and the community will start to hear about this more. And I think as part of the ODOT permit process, we're going to also try to engage with our businesses along the route so that we can have a conversation about what it might look like to have the trolley running up and down here in Monmouth on Main Street and on Monmouth Street in Independence. So I mentioned that we're, at this point, we have a timeline that looks like, I should have mentioned, we are also put out an RFP for a technology provider so that there will be an on-app and website location where people can find the bus, find out where it is. They can make the connection if they have an on-demand service. So we're going to be bringing the technology provider aboard in the next, 2 weeks or so, and we'll be beginning to work with them to develop that connection to the service. And we're waiting for trolleys to be delivered. That's a big determinant about how we're going to roll out the implementation of the service. We know once the vehicles arrive that the people who drive them are going to have to learn how to drive them, or learn how they operate, because they're a little bit different than other buses. And so we're planning that we hope that by the end of November or early November that we're going to be able to have some kind of an opening event, and the trolleys will be visible and here on the ground. But what you'll see on the presentation on the right side of the slide is that we have a lot to put together in order for the service to come together. And I think I've mentioned all of them. We've got permitting in with ODOT and intergovernmental agreement with Chariots to be our operator. We need to finalize a budget for what it will actually take to operate the vehicles. And there are some boring things like figuring out like policies about advertising, because I think folks will wonder, can we use the trolleys? Can we advertise on the vehicles? And what does that look like? And I think we need to figure out how we're going to decide whether or not the service is successful and seek funding to sustain the service in the long term. So there are some things left to work out, certainly, about the way this service is going to work. But I think my goal tonight was to make sure that you knew a little bit about what was going on with service planning, and also find out if you had questions or if there were things that you'd been hearing about that you were curious about that I could answer.
Yes. Have we determined about use outside of the parameters? Obviously, these vehicles will be running pretty regularly, and I know there are federal laws associated with private businesses not being able to, public agencies not being able to bid on transit service that may compete with private businesses. So I'm just curious if we've addressed that yet.
We haven't addressed it. And actually, given the service hours that we've been proposing for the service, it's going to be it's difficult for me to imagine when a private operator or a private reservation would allow for the use of the trolleys. We bought 3 because we'd have 2 running at any one time, and I'll just call the third one a spare because we may need to bring it into service if it's got maintenance. So
4th of July comes to mind always with people saying, can't we have a shuttle between the 2 cities? And so
I also think about just Central High School, the release of students every afternoon, and we're going to have to we're going to have a kind of a wait and see, not a wait and see approach, but a first month kind of an experience to try to figure out how much demand there is for the trolley.
All the students will be running across the street to Taco Bell. What do you mean?
That's true. Taco Bell's open. Might be a bigger deal than a trolley. Absolutely. So. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor McKeel.
Will there be, thank you, Madam Mayor, will there be a bike rack on the trolley so you can take your bike?
Yes.
Perfect, okay.
All right. Cool. No other questions?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes,
I see citizen advisory boards. That's what we're thinking would be. Yes.
Thanks for that question. So our budget chair asked a very astute question during budget time, and that was, in essence, who's making decisions about this? And there's a limited time for which this service planning can happen with a staff level group. But at some point, it would be helpful among the cities and the partners putting together the plan to have some kind of an advisory board when it's time to make decisions about either what's working or what's not, about stops, what's working and what's not about the service, whether and how it should continue. That it would be very useful to have an advisory board made up of some of you, folks from Independence, community members, to evaluate how we're doing.
Great. Yep, thanks. I think that's an excellent idea. We can look forward to putting it together. Sure.
I'm sorry. I just have to say how nice it will be to have the off-route pickup. I can just see the trolley pulling up in front of my house and, everybody getting really excited. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I have 2 parts. One is the on-demand service is a big question mark, and we're just not sure how much demand for on-demand service there will be. And so that's another thing we're going to have to just figure out. But you're right that I think the availability and visibility of the trolleys in the community, we're hoping, people will find out soon that how often it runs and that it's free.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be attractive to the community.
I can't wait for my grandkids to come because I'm going to say, hey, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, there's this thing that's going to pull up in front of the house.
Trolley.
That's exciting.
All right. Thank you. And stop sharing, I guess.
Did I stop sharing? It looked like I did, but I could be wrong. Thank you. Stop sharing.
All right. Our final work session item this evening is a discussion about the city noise code. And I think I'll frame this a little bit by just saying that, we're evolving our downtown quite a bit, and obviously lots of discussion about future. And we really encourage 2 things that might seem to be in conflict. And one is downtown housing, more folks living in downtown or in this area, and entertainment. And we obviously have a couple of examples of that, not just our own music in the park and commercial entertainment. We also have Western Oregon, which has continued to increase their offerings of outdoor entertainment. We have children's theater, and we have folks inquiring about using the amphitheater for more things. And so those two things are great. They encourage the vibrancy of downtown. They're what we want. And how can we make them live in harmony? Those are things we didn't address as we've kind of gotten these growing pains. So we wanted to just talk through that. No decisions this evening. And we will Marty's done some research, I think, sort of looked at what some other potential things are that communities do, because we're not trying to stop anything. We're not trying to, control things. We want to make sure that there is a standard by which everyone understands what that is, and we can more successfully manage it. So I think I did receive a public comment, someone who was not here at the beginning of the meeting. I'm going to hold that for a bit and let Marty kind of finish her report and see if we have questions.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Mayor. That was about half of my staff report.
Sorry.
So I appreciate your opening comments there, and I wanted to just likewise. Tonight, council is asked to just begin a discussion and give guidance about whether any changes should be considered to our current nuisance code, and specifically the sections that relate to amplified music and noise. Just to frame up what I think is the state of things, we received a few complaints last year and also this year about the level of the music volume that comes from a business of Main Street when they have live music. The police department enforces our noise ordinance on a complaint basis, and essentially it has issued warnings to the business in response to the few complaints. It's admittedly doesn't seem fair to have a single complaint make a difference between whether live music can be enjoyed by many. And so again, what we're trying to do is, I think, open a dialogue about striking a balance between having healthy businesses and customers come to our downtown businesses in a vital nightlife here in the downtown, and the peace and quiet that some residents want to enjoy. So Chief Haynes is here. Chief Haynes and Lieutenant Olafson are here, and they also we've done a little bit of homework about codes in the surrounding cities around us, and also practically what other cities do to enforce their code. And I think what we've discovered is that there are some places where we have some ambiguity in our current, there's some things that are not clear in our current code, such as, and there are good and bad things about things being ambiguous, because when there's not clarity in the code, then it gives you a chance to work things out real time if there's a problem or if a single complaint comes in. And so the few areas where we have a less clarity in the code include how to determine whether or not if a noise is measurably too loud, or what constitutes a violation and what's allowed. So those are things that we've got a standard in there now that that noise would not be audible by 1,000 feet away, and that's a more subjective standard that I think makes it potentially difficult for our police department to enforce. Another is that when enforcing the current noise code, what tools the police department has to remedy the noise if it's excessive. So a way to measure it, and then a way to say this is greater than a standard that's in the code. A third, we have another lack of clarity in our code, and it references a permit that the council can grant for amplified sound in any place in the city. And the limits on that language are that the council basically would be issuing a permit for the limits that are currently in the code. So it's not very useful, right? There are not provisions for exceeding a standard if there were one. And then finally, one of the things that we've experienced is that the mayor referenced, we have multiple events, and sometimes they happen on the same night. And so sometimes the nature of the complaint is that we've got competing events, and is there any mechanism or a wish to resolve conflicts for events that happen at the same time? So those are some things that we've been experiencing. I invited Lieutenant Olafson and Chief Haynes to be here also, just to say a little bit, or it'd be good to hear from the police department about practically what has been happening with enforcement activities and the nature of the complaints they have received, which admittedly have not been many. We haven't had a big volume of complaints, but we have had complaints about the volume, which is that from households who are more than 1,000 feet away from where some of these events are taking place. So again, there's not a decision here tonight. I was hoping to open a discussion with you about your thoughts about whether there were any changes you would want to make to the code. It looks like there's interest by folks who have come tonight about where you might want to take this. And I also wanted to ask Chief Haynes if he wanted to say anything about what our police department has been experiencing.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Yeah, I think this is it's time for I think a robust discussion. I appreciate that Marty, I think, brought this up and brought it before you all to at least consider. And I say that I think that, you know, for years, our ordinance has sufficed the way it is, and it's allowed us to, I think, have discretion, but also be fair, and it was effective in what it needed to be. I think now that we've grown as a city, and we've even, you know, we have businesses now that they have live music as part of their business plan, and it's time for us to kind of, I guess, look at that and see how best to deal with that. And I think we've always treated this really, we call it just our noise ordinance, and you guys have all, I'm sure, read it now and probably have it in front of you, but it's basically what's unreasonable. And there's a handful of things in there that are very specific, but there's a lot of things that aren't, and that's been good for us. You know, we've had complaints, you know, from, you know, kids that are playing in the backyard that are perceived by some to be too loud, and that gives us some discretion to deal with that and find some solutions, but not always enforce, and it's good in those cases. In this case, and I will say specifically as it relates to business, you have businesses now that are just very close to residential. And I don't think, and this is my personal opinion, and I won't stray too far off into the woods here, but you have somebody who's operating a business in the downtown district, and I think that they're even being reasonable in their hours, in my opinion. In the summertime, you know, from, let's say it's evening until 10 o'clock, it's fairly reasonable. But on the same token, you never know what somebody, what their circumstances are, and if they have little kids that are trying to sleep, or what hours they work, all these things. And what's happened is that we have some people that live close enough that it's disrupted their lives, and it's caused some, I mean, I'll say discomfort. And so we're trying to figure out, and we've tried to work with both parties to figure out how best to deal with that, and we haven't found a solution. And here we are. And so I think that, you know, as I look at this, and we've talked about a little bit, this is one of those times that I think that some further clarity as it pertains to the downtown business district may be helpful for everyone, that they can pull up, you know, the city website, and they can see right on there, hey, these are the rules. And so we know that what the police response is going to be, and so that it's a consistent response, and there is no questions. And I guess that's my own 2 cents on the things, but I know it's sometimes difficult. Again, there's a lot of discussion that can be brought up, but that's kind of some of the history, a little bit, and some of my my thoughts, and I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate that. So I don't know if others have been involved with receiving complaints or hearing concerns about this. I think one of the things that's been particularly frustrating is when we get reports, particularly people who are putting on an event, and trying up front to sort of coordinate, collaborate. No one saying don't do this, but saying, gosh, would it work out if we're doing, and Applebox Children's Theater is one we all know, and they perform. Children's voices don't carry very far. And so, you know, trying to figure out what's a way, they only do 2 or 3 performances. Could we work out a schedule where we could do that? That didn't work. for particular business owners. And really, it's the first time we've ever had a business with outdoor music. Obviously, we've had indoor music in some of our old establishments back in the day. But you want to create that atmosphere of collaboration, of cooperation, saying, gosh, what's one good for one could be good for all. And because that hasn't seemed to work, and I appreciate Chief Marty herself, who's tried to sort of discuss some other ways to go about this, haven't been successful. And giving more objective standard for, as Chief says, everyone can read it ahead of time and know what those expectations are seems more fair. Certainly, there will still be people to complain about the noise, and we understand that that's a concern, but if our expectations are being met as a community, a collaborative community, then I think that's easier for, again, them to enforce, but everyone to accept. And again, now we've got more people living downtown than ever. We have a bed and breakfast, our only lodging establishment off of 99, right at the edge of this. And so we want those folks to also be able to enjoy what they came to town for. So thoughts about this. I know Councilor Oberst, you had been involved in some of these discussions as well with presenting groups or folks who wanted to.
Right.
I
I don't know where to start. I guess, and I can't remember which one of you said it first or best, but I think one of the problems we've got is a need to share the air downtown. When I was sitting in Cisa's seat, we had Cycle Oregon came to town. We borrowed Independence's portable stage and set it up in Main Street Park, pointed towards the gazebo, which points it towards the university stage. And we didn't ask anybody if that was going to impact anything. And meanwhile, Apple Box Children's Theater was planning a show, and they didn't stop to think that anything would be going on in the park. So the weekend Cycle Oregon was here was the weekend that Apple Box Children's Theater was doing their presentation, and it didn't go well for the children, I'm afraid. The second and third night, Cycle Oregon turned their volume down. It's still, it was still too loud for the kids. Last summer was the first summer of performances on Main Street at Dry Town Tap. And the Valley Shakespeare Theater had a problem with noise walking on adult actors. So this year, the university spent $30,000 on a sound system, so every actor can be mic'd. I've got insight into this because my spouse is the resident choreographer for the Valley Shakespeare Company. After last year, the director, and this is my understanding, the director approached Dry Town about this problem and shared the performance dates for this summer. And it made, no difference. The night I went to the Shakespeare in Love performance, anytime there was quiet, when the actors weren't speaking, the music intruded. I talked to someone else who went the next night, and I think it was a Journey cover band maybe, and they reported almost being able to feel the bass. And that was, 2.5 blocks away. Just last weekend, as I tried to go to bed at 9:30 or so, I'm over by Monmouth Elementary, and I could hear every note of the guitar. Now, I'm going to grant that the wind was blowing exactly the wrong direction for that. There are times when I can hear the horns between quarters at the Woo football games when the wind is out of the west. Certainly, I can hear Independence's 4th of July fireworks clear as a bell where I am. It's, a straight shot bouncing off the South Salem hills. The thing I see as different with the various forms of entertainment downtown, Music in the Park is 7 nights out of the whole year. And we have 4th of July music as well, and some of that goes into the evening a little bit. The university, I counted Apple Box and 2 weekends of the Shakespeare, and they're bringing in a visiting troupe next year, so that's 4 weekends that it would be nice to not have to compete. The music on Main Street is going on 2 and 3 nights a week for months. And that's where I think it wears on people who live in the area, is that it's night after night. And they get into the weekend and they know that they're going to hear it again. If it was less frequent, if there were days off on the weekends or weekends off, I think it would go a long way towards people being able to, deal with this better. And I read the note we got earlier, and I don't see this as being targeted so much as triggered by. We don't have a noise standard, really. In order for government to be fair to everybody, it's got to have objective standards for stuff like this. If we just say, "Oh, you're too loud, you got to turn it down," that's not going to work. If we can have some kind of objective standard, and I don't know if the 1,000-foot standard is it, I don't know if a decibel meter is it from a certain distance away, if it pegs 90 decibels at 500 feet, that's as loud as it can be. I don't know what the standard is. I do know it needs to apply to everything. It needs to apply to music in the park. It needs to apply to music by the park. It needs to apply to Shakespeare. Yeah, it needs to apply to everything. And if we can come up with, and I don't know what the standard is, I'm not versed in that. I think we look at other communities and see what they're doing, but we need an objective standard that can spell out to everybody. And I think we need, and I hate to say this, but I think the city has got to be the broker of this, some kind of way for people to know that when they have a less frequent event, like we're bringing in with a National Endowment for the Arts grant, a touring group next summer that's going to do the abridged works, complete works of Shakespeare. Every Shakespeare play can mash. It's hilarious. It's really fun. And I would hate to see that have to compete, So I don't know how we do that either. How do we have basically a calendar that says, okay, this is your weekend, this is your weekend, that starts to get icky. And it would be nice if we could just have the mutual respect that when one group that doesn't need every weekend says, I need this weekend, and have the respect to let them have that weekend downtown. Because it is, there are houses across the park. There are houses half a block away, for goodness gracious sakes. There are houses across the street from Lou's outdoor stage. I hear football games, but there needs to be some kind of objective standard. And as far as the downtown evening performances in the few months of dry weather we have, we need to figure out how to get people to share, because the sharing is what's not happening right now. And I think that's what's gotten us to where we are, having this discussion tonight. Failure to share, failure to respect each other and each other's needs. And it's I'll just leave it at that. Okay, sorry.
Other thoughts?
Do you have examples of what other cities have done? Is the 1,000 feet, is that something you got from somewhere else? Like what are some of the examples that other cities are doing to help alleviate the noise?
So the 1,000-foot standard is what's in our current code. So if I would say, and please folks from our police department weigh in on this, if there was a measurement of what is audible within 1,000 feet, that would be the standard that our department would use today. And there leaves some subjectivity in there. The 1,000 feet is something that you can measure, but whether it's audible at that distance, it's not so clear. So I didn't come tonight with, I'm prepared to walk through some of the other examples, although I think the guidance that I put in my staff report that I'm looking for from the council is, if you would like me to come up with examples of codes that have objective standards, some of those look like decibel level measurements or community standards that are decibel level measurements or noise limits within zones, which it makes it, it's been pointed out by our chief that that's difficult, right? We have our residential and our, right in our downtown zone, we've got folks living and working and running businesses. So I can bring other examples from other places. Our most surrounding cities have identical codes to ours. And so then the question becomes, what kind of enforcement activities do they engage in? Do they get complaints? When they get complaints, do they enforce, and what do they enforce? And I think there's probably some differences from community to community. So I didn't come tonight with sort of, examples or recommendations because I wanted to get a sense from the council about what you were interested in exploring more.
So some of these alternatives that are listed, right, are different options that could be, if there were some that we felt seemed more like the direction we wanted to go versus some we just said, we're not interested in even exploring that. That would help sort of narrow it a bit.
Yeah, like the decibels. I mean, that if you have examples of that, like who measures that? Whose decision is that? How do we, figure that out? I would be interested in that piece, but also maybe looking at, the times that people have the entertainment, and maybe, if it's a little louder, and then it's turned down between maybe 8 and 10. I don't know, but there's so that there's a, if it's not, if it's late night, things like that, it's turned down a little bit. Something to where it's measurable, like you were saying, and to know that would be interesting to find out, how other cities measure that. Is that something that would work in the space that we have? I mean, we don't want to limit the entertainment or the opportunities, but again, finding that balance of what works in our community, I like that. The mutual respect. I mean, it'd be nice to know what's happening, and that's really hard. It's hard.
Legislate that.
I mean, I have a family of 5. I have 3 calendars. I mean, it's hard, to do something like that. And somehow, if that's happening, to figure out how to balance that as well.
Well, and one of those would be, it talks about potentially a permit process, but that's also a burden, administrative burden on staff to be managing. And so it is an option to say, if you want to exceed X, then you would be requesting a permit.
Sure.
But again, that's a staff position, a staff person we don't always have.
Well, and then I'm also interested in what's going to also help our police department and make their lives a little easier. There's so many other things that has to be done in our city than the noise complaint issue. And so, and I like the idea of having objective and concrete, more concrete rules. Like this is our standards, this is what we have, because I do think it would help then minimize that conflict and minimize the time and the staffing for our police department.
Well, and then potentially it talks here about, abatement or explicit enforcement authorities. So you could have a graduated number of warnings, versus, and then what that kind of potentially enforcement would change based on X, right? Sure. Might be something we would be looking at.
Okay.
What else? Yes.
Oh, yes. I just want to make a point. We do need to update this because in item 12, we have newsboys that are still selling newspapers.
Yeah.
So, I thought if nothing else, we need to include the news girls in there.
Yeah, there's some code. There's some code issues everywhere, right?
But I do wonder, I think in some way we're comparing maybe apples and oranges when we talk about the Wednesday night concerts and then a business. And that the area that you're trying to put that music out into, or the sound out into, is radically different. And so I think as we're looking at establishing a code, recognizing how far you're trying to project that music. So if it's in a small space, logically, you don't need as loud a noise to project something that's, 15 feet away, versus the amphitheater, which is a large space where they have, 300 people, or we should have asked Bill, where they're trying to project in a much large area. And then also the same with the Shakespeare in the Park.
Or other outdoor performances, yeah. It's
Right,
not
where
just-
you're trying to project to hundreds of people in a very large area versus a small area that's
and
pretty confined.
amplified musical instruments versus amplified voices, obviously very different as well. And then trying to deal with the screaming kids who are amplifying their voices. And yes, Councilor Betts.
Well, just in order, to summarize, because we're getting close to 9 o'clock.
Yes, we are.
I do see it says, of all the suggestion alternatives that staff would recommend focusing on changes that clarify. I agree with these three: a measurable standard for allowable and violation of noise, enforcement provisions during complaints, and then this permit process and what that provides for. Those all seem like reasonable things that staff could be looking at, as well as looking at what do other communities of a similar size do. Looking at Salem is great, but they're just so different. But yeah, definitely understanding what Dallas does, what Corvallis does, what Independence does, I think would be very helpful. And the goal is that everybody can enjoy what they want to enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be putting on an event in May at Main Street Park, and I've had to look at what else might be happening that day. And I worked with the city recorder on what other events are happening. And I'm very cognizant of that, because I want people to be able to come and enjoy the event that we're putting on. But everybody should be able to enjoy whatever event it is that they're coming to downtown.
Yeah, and it's similarly, we were looking at a potential conflict at the end of this month where we have the History and Mystery event, which this year is people stationed along Main Street at various points of interest, telling stories about the history of our community. Well, at the same time, it was looking like we might have the Manite Day, the Marshall Islands celebration, starting that same evening. Music, dance going on in the park for that celebration would have made it nearly impossible for anyone to enjoy speakers, even if they're amplified along Main Street at 7 o'clock at night. So I think that conflict is resolved. I think they are only performing on the Saturday. But yeah,
it's a good example.
Drawing people downtown, to have a vibrant downtown, we need variety of events. We need a variety of people offering those events and benefiting from the enjoyment of the outdoors. And so something where we can create that balance is helpful. All right.
Are we going to listen to the owner? Are you guys going to listen to the owner?
Well, I asked for public comment earlier, and we didn't have anyone indicate they wanted to speak.
Well,
I
communication, but she is here right now. If you want to hear her
Well,
side, or are you just going to hear your side?
Well, I don't think we're taking sides. I think we said if folks had public comment, they were welcome to comment before the meeting.
But that's not regarding the subject matter.
I didn't say that. I just said if they had something that they wanted to discuss.
She's here if you want to listen to her.
I don't know that we need more information about this. No, we're listening to what our staff report said and what our staff said.
Oh, that's from our staff.
We don't have staff from Western.
That's not Western, that was from me.
So,
That was from.
so we're not hearing any of that. We were listening to our staff explain, and our police chief explain the kind of complaints and concerns they have, and talk about how we want to balance those. I don't think there's any.
So the answer is yes, so you do want to hear
We have a meeting in 2 weeks and she can have public comment.
Yeah.
We're not making any decisions
We're not
either.
making any decisions on this at all tonight or potentially even in 2 weeks. We're just starting to gather information on this. And we would welcome additional public comment, emails regarding what folks see as reasonable based on these thoughts that we have. This is all that's the stage we're at.
And trying to be an active member in the community. The one major flaw in the community itself is the determination of what the heck is going on in either of the two towns on any given moment.
True.
We don't get much communication from Western. We don't have there's no reason that two towns live so close together that we can't find out what's going on at Central, what's going on at Western, what's going on in town, in all one spot. It should just be something that the community's put together, that's where it finds out. So then if there was a concert that could be avoided, maybe they have comedy that night instead of a loud concert because the Apple Box Theater is trying to do their thing, or the Shakespeare, or whatever it is that whoever complained about, that noise ordinance, because it doesn't sound to me from the comments that I've been listening to that has anything to do with the residents.
There have been residential complaints too, but thanks. We got that, and actually there are that calendar conversation's gone on multiple times, and multiple people think they have the solution right now, and we don't know. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I think the question then we did have someone sign up for public comment, but really I think we know the value that the entertainment brings. We know that there are some concerns about it and ways that we can balance all the potential needs from either complainants or from people we want to be successful in their business and in bringing entertainment to our community. And we will have additional discussion. I think what we're looking for are more solutions from folks, not more complaints or concerns. I think we understand what those might be. We really want to look at ways that we can make a successful solution that everybody understands. If that will help.
Tonight I was hoping to get guidance from the council about whether you wanted to look at our noise ordinance, and I think I have that feedback. And I alerted the business owner that at some point the council might entertain her input. So at whatever point you think you'd like that, or it sounds like you'd prefer it to be in writing, that would be.
Or at the next meeting when maybe we've had a chance, now that folks know where we're going, what we're thinking. We're not thinking of shutting anybody down or trying to, completely get rid of anything at all. We want to encourage this, and I think maybe if folks know that, they can offer some solutions and some additional ideas and input. We would welcome that.
And should this be during public comment? So just.
Yep. That's what we asked for this evening, if anybody in the audience wanted to speak to us. And so
at the beginning, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Now, at the beginning of every meeting, there's an opportunity to fill out a speaker card, and I guess that wasn't clear. So
well, that's why I stopped to encourage it a couple of times before we started. So.
Apologies for that.
Not used to having folks back in the building.
This is new for us as well, having people here. So. I'm sorry?
We would probably wreck things to have it happen now.
Yeah, we're going to try and wrap up our business, though we have a couple more things this evening. This will be a discussion item on another agenda. I know Marty reached out proactively to let folks know this was going to be on the agenda tonight so they could hear our discussion. She will do so again. She's been extremely personally engaged in making sure that this isn't like we're trying to come down on anybody and surprise folks with some of these discussions. So I know you'll continue that.
Yes.
And we
I'll
will.
try to be clearer about the public comment point so that.
Yes, we'll be very clear next time that public comment will be taken at the beginning of the meeting on that item or any other item, as we always do. And we will, at this point, move forward to finish up our agenda. Just have our reports. And tonight, for the mayor's report, I would like to mention that we
Thanks for coming, y'all.
thank you for listening and solutions. We will take solutions. I think you've been invited to the League of Oregon Cities. If you can go, please be sure you get signed up for that. I will not be able to be there, so take good notes. And I also want to point out that you should have all received an email from the League of Oregon Cities inviting you to sign up for 2 versions of training. One of which was a one-day workshop and the other was expressing interest in an ongoing course. Both of those were being offered by Western Oregon University. This is the culmination of the work that came out of the Mayor's Roundtable when one of those suggestions was for the cities of Monmouth and Independence to offer training and help people understand more about racial healing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. President Rex Fuller worked with staff. Interim President Jay Kenton continued to work with them. Tom Pessmer from the City of Independence, Marty, when she came on board, were instrumental in helping Western determine what kinds of things would work for a community-based group rather than a sort of academic look at these issues. And that was what created what's now called JEDI training, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Training 101. The fact that the connections that were made that Marty helped facilitate with the League of Oregon Cities, meaning that training will now be available to every counselor, every mayor, every city staff person, really from Western was, I thought, an amazing moment. It really showed what our community can do. The fact that we have piloted that program through 2 cohorts, given them that feedback. It's a wonderful opportunity to showcase our community, Western, and how that collaboration is going to help communities across the state. So pretty excited about that. You're all welcome to sign up if you want to. I think
So you will underwrite
the city will pay for our professional development in that area. So if you'd like to attend that, as with any league workshop or any league conference, we do have a professional development budget for ourselves and for our volunteers that we would like to start.
So how does it work? Do I sign up and get a bill and then present the bill to Phyllis?
Oftentimes the league will say, where do you want the billing sent? Do you want to pay for this or do you want the billing sent?
And then just send it.
To Marty or Phyllis?
It'll actually
Just
give
go
you,
to this, okay.
it'll say, if you say Monmouth, it'll
Okay.
say Monmouth
Oh,
City
okay.
Hall. They
Okay.
know the address, so. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be, sorry, I don't mean to, it's like, it'd be really fun to take, I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to look for dates, but it'd be fun to have like a couple of us do it. Sorry, no pressure, but to have, because there's going to be common language and thinking that comes out of this. So
Which
I'm
is-
assuming because
That's
you've
been the
taken it.
benefit of having classes of 10 people from Monmouth participate in the last 2 cohorts. So yes,
That's
it would be
fantastic.
absolutely.
And we can still do that.
Yes.
We can still arrange our own cohort and will for staff and things to continue to go through. But this just broadens the opportunity. And the one-day workshop is new. They had not offered that in the past. So
Would it be better for me to wait? Because I couldn't do the last one because I was like, it was an in-person and I was out of town.
Yeah.
But so, and this one is like over Zoom, which like opens it wide open. it's much easier to do that.
I would take the opportunity if your schedule allows.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
To do the classes.
Well, right now, they're not they're asking interest for the 8 course.
Oh, okay.
That's why
I
there's no
think
date.
the link
Okay.
just says, sign up here if you're interested. They're trying to determine that.
Okay.
They are taking registration for the 1 day
Okay.
currently.
That's why there's like,
So
where's
if
the
you have
date?
any
I was
interest,
looking everywhere.
Please indicate your either interest or sign up if the workshop is more.
Okay, great, thank you.
So yes, I just wanted to encourage folks on that because that was pretty special that Western is being the sponsor of that. Also, speaking of Western, the president will be doing his State of the University address on the 19th, I believe. And so you may receive invitations to that, or I can get you more information about that. But that's really when he invites the folks back on campus to learn about his vision for our community.
Sorry, I missed that date.
The president's, it's the 19th, the morning of the 19th, I believe.
Thank you, sorry about that.
The Monday? No? Maybe not the 19th.
That's right.
Is it?
The 19th is right.
Okay. Did you get it?
I shot it in.
Perfect. Okay. All right. That's all I have. So we'll if we can be brief about our boards and commissions. Yeah, go ahead.
Our board, the Historic Commission, meets tomorrow, so that's very brief. And I just have a quick announcement, just a reminder, Hispanic Heritage Celebration, September 24th, 12 to 5. We will have a live band between 3 and 5, but they'll be done at 5. And so, and we'll also have Ballet Folklorico before that as well. We have amazing booths and activities for all of our community members and families. So please, I hope that you are able to be there from 12 to 5 at Main Street Park.
Great. Do we know when the mural's going to be finished, Historic Commission?
Yes.
Yeah, it should be done the first or second week in October. It's been a little bit delayed because she can't be necessarily over 90 degrees.
Right.
Surprisingly, we've been
Yeah.
getting a few of those. So yeah, we are just trying to schedule the ribbon cutting
Good.
ceremony probably for that second week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's looking great.
I know, it's amazing.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, good, thanks. Right, other boards, other commissions. We had a 5th week of the month kind of, and so we didn't meet a lot.
I'll
Yes.
just, and I mentioned this last time, Parks Commission is having a tour of small parks. They will meet I think it's at 6 on next Wednesday, and use the senior center bus to run around town and see the small parks and see what has been done and what needs to be done and so on. I will not be there. Russ will not be there. So we have told them, speaking of take good notes, I dropped a note to the Parks Board tonight asking them to be sure to take good notes for me. So I'll let you know what they find.
All right, thanks. All right, that takes us to our city manager's report.
You know, I have the benefit of going last, and at that point, most of the time, many of the things that I was planning to cover, you've already covered. So I just have 3 really quick items on Friday report. One is, I think most of you know that I have a planned time out of office to attend the International City Managers Conference, which is in Columbus, Ohio this year. I'll be out from the 19th of September through the 27th. It includes a short visit and vacation with family. So I'll be missing a council meeting during that time, but the lucky department head who has the most things on the agenda will get to serve in my seat that night. And I'll be sorry to miss some of the other community events that are underway during that time. Music in the Park was already covered. That was a successful concert series that wrapped up last Wednesday, and you already heard from Bill Foster about that we had great participation from Ash Creek Arts Association. Tomorrow we have a ribbon cutting with the Mediterranean restaurant across the street.
boy.
11:30 ribbon cutting.
Tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. We hope you'll come and
What time?
celebrate the opening.
11:30
11:30.
11:30 p.m.
Lunchtime.
No.
After I turn into
Right, and then the mural was covered. I also put in Friday notes that if you're interested in attending SEDCOR's annual awards lunch, which is going to be happening on September 14th, the deadline to sign up is this this week, September 9th. So if you want to attend, please let me know and I can put a registration together for you. It's at 11 a.m. at the Salem Convention Center. And I think that's all I've got for tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other council comments or announcements? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I just have one quick comment. Cece, you handled things very well tonight. Thank you. Move to adjourn.
And all in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. We are adjourned.
It's